Once again, we find ourselves following the marvelous misadventures of the madman with a box and his trusty pet, and K9. Ba-dum-boom. I'm just kidding. But seriously, let's start this season off right with the return of the Daleks. This time, the Doctor and Romana, using the randomizer from the previous season, have somehow managed to land on Skaro again. Only it's a couple thousand years after the last time the Doctor has been on Skaro. The place is barren, the Thals are nowhere around, and somehow, someway, there is still life on Skaro, in the form of strange beings that seem to be dying of exhaustion and malnutrition rather than radiation, which is still a problem on the planet. They also come across a group of beings who at first look like they might be some sort of future Dravins, but in fact are revealed to be beings called Movalans. They're conducting a survey of the planet to see why the Daleks seem to have returned as well. Everyone is looking for something, and the Doctor intends to find out what, or who. As it turns out, the Daleks are digging for their old creator, Davros, who somehow managed to survive being exterminated by his creations and has been able to stay in stasis for many centuries. As it turns out, the Daleks want him for the same reason the Movalans decide to capture the Doctor. The Movalans are robots whose battle computer has devised a perfect strategy against the Daleks. Seems the position of supreme ruler of everything is now up for grabs, and the Movalans want in. But the Daleks, being Daleks, have devised their own battle computer strategy, and their computer is able to counteract the Movalan computer with every move. Unfortunately, the Movalan computer adapts, and the result is a stalemate between both battle fleets. No one can fire a single shot. So, the Daleks want to bring back Davros to see if he can't maybe reprogram their computers in order to give them an edge. And that's exactly what the Movalans decide to do. At least with the Doctor. They even threaten Romana. Luckily, the Movalans are pretty easy to deal with. Turns out they wear their power packs on their belts, and it's a simple matter of quickly outmaneuvering and deactivating said Movalans, and rejiggering the battery packs to alter their programming so some of the Movalans fight on the side of the Doctor, Romana, and the slaves that the Daleks have been working practically to death while looking for Davros. Also, since the ship is impenetrable, Davros has decided to turn some of his Daleks into a suicide squad by strapping bombs to their chests and backs. Luckily, the Doctor is able to use a remote he rigged up while keeping Davros hostage for like 5 minutes in order to destroy the Daleks before they have a chance to destroy the Movalan ship. Meanwhile, Romana has to fight a Movalan who's slowly running out of power and keep him from detonating a device that would completely incinerate the atmosphere of the planet. So, ultimately, the victory goes to the Doctor, Romana, and the humanoids that now use the Movalan ship to get back to safety. Fun fact about this particular serial. Sadly, Michael Wisher, the original actor who played Davros, wasn't available to film again. So, they took his original headpiece out of a display case where it had been since the original serial had been shot, modified it slightly and gave it to a new guy who pretty decently acted like a Davros that's been, on ice for a couple of centuries. Unfortunately, after they finished the cereal, they threw the headpiece out. Some people never learn. Junking episodes and junking precious prop treasures. You know how much that thing could have been worth today? Oh, by the way, Davros, for his crimes against the universe, literally gets put on ice, cryo freeze. Meanwhile, the Doctor and Romana move on to their next adventure. They go to Gay Paris. Yes, that's really what they used to call it, Gay Paris, Paris. While exploring, they come across an art heist. This weird count is using alien technology to steal the Mona Lisa so that he and his accomplice, a human female, can sell it for millions. But the kicker is, the Count is not human. He's a creature called a Jaggeroth, the last of his species. Apparently, 400 million years ago, on Proto-Earth, his people crash-landed here in a big ship. Unfortunately, they tried to use warp drive within the atmosphere to get away, rather than rockets. And that resulted in the ship getting completely destroyed, and the last Jaggeroth being fragmented throughout multiple timelines. But it proved useful, as the destruction of the Jaggeroth spaceship released radiation which kick-started the primordial goop from which all life on Earth sprung. And as for the last Jaggeroth himself, he was able to coordinate with his other selves in order to forward human technology to the point where he could get rudimentary time manipulation in the late 70s. Also, he found himself in the company of Leonardo da Vinci, who was persuaded to paint some extra Mona Lisas for him, which he then sequestered in his home in the future to be sold along with the original Mona Lisa, so that everybody could say they have their own Mona Lisa. And that money would be used to pay for his true end, which was to reverse time on Earth to the point where he blew up his ship, actually a couple minutes before, so he could literally stop himself from killing the last of his kind. Unfortunately, he doesn't realize that that point is fixed, and he can't mess with a fixed point in time. If he never blew up his ship, then he never fragmented, he never forwarded all that technology, he never kickstarted life on Earth. Luckily, the Doctor and Romana were able to stop him. But not before he killed the scientist who helped him, because the guy was kind of a weenie. And he was able to write, "This is a fake," on all the canvases before they were painted, so that the when the paintings were x-rayed, they would be revealed to be fakes. And while he tried to do things over a second time, when he got back to the present, his trusty butler / enforcer mistook him for a monster because his real form was that of a cyclops. And he threw something at him which blew up the whole building, with the false paintings and the one real painting with them, all except for one falsie, which is now hanging in the Louvre. The human companion of the Jaggeroth, having been killed by him after she realizes what he is and that she's been had. After that, the Doctor and Romana end up on a planet that's got 0 natural metal and is lousy with plants. Unfortunately, it's lorded over by a wicked humanoid female who basically tries to enslave the population by keeping them metal poor. What little metal there is on the planet is foreign, and it's basically all hers. And anyone who fails her or disagrees with her gets thrown down a hole where this giant blob creature, whose brain can be detached from its body and move around, crushes the hapless victim to death. Although she thinks that they get eaten, but they don't. Also on the planet are a group of primitives who steal metal whenever they get it, and they are quite bloodthirsty. All they care about is killing those who get in their way and getting as much metal as possible. The leader isn't exactly a saint either. He always slips up his tongue by saying he's rich instead of his group is rich. Luckily, he doesn't last long. Ultimately, the Doctor and Romana figure out that the creature is actually intelligent, and it comes from a planet that's lousy with metal but has 0 plants, and plants are what the creatures need. The Doctor manages to assist the creature once it convinces 2 of the primitives to give it back its translator, to draw up a treaty between the people of the plant planet and its people, so they could do a trade agreement. And the Wicked Queen, who was originally approached with this show of good faith, but ended up imprisoning the poor creature. Ultimately, she gets her comeuppance, and her second in command and disgraced soothsayer get put back in positions of power to run things. Hopefully they'll do it right. Oh, and fun fact. The personal assassin of the Wicked Queen is actually the same lady who played the cave woman in An Unearthly Child, the old lady, and the old tailor lady who gives up the Rebel and Susan, I think it was Susan, in the Dalek Invasion movie. Same actress. On to the next adventure. This time, the Doctor and Romana end up in the middle of a space fender bender. A space liner ends up colliding with a small space vessel, a science vessel, while it's in warp, so the ships are fused. Add to that some sort of drug smuggling operation that causes the space liner's navigator to go all loopy and apathetic, which is why they crashed in the first place. Excuse me. and the Doctor and Romana are forced to lie and say they're insurance agents, and then accidentally get framed for being drug smugglers. And once the cops show up, they are very overzealous. They're fully prepared to kill the Doctor and Romana if they try to resist. All because traces of the drug, which cause severe apathy followed by severe withdrawal and then death, were in his pocket. The Doctor said is. Oh, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Those cops need oversight. Meanwhile, on the scientific vessel, the scientist heading up a creature catalog experiment has this device which is similar to the zoo that the third Doctor encountered way back in his journeys. Remember that? He's got basically samples of planets with various life forms in them, compressed into crystals, and the mini worlds are projected as images, which you can step into. Mainly because the technology is just a wee bit unstable. Probably why it was eventually outlawed by the time of the Third Doctor's adventure. Anyway, it's revealed that the scientist and the guy piloting the science vessel are actually smugglers who are using the drug business to fund his research because the funding was cut. He says that those people who are dying of that drug, which is now highly illegal, made a choice to become drug addicts. But if you put cake in front of someone and don't tell them anything about it, they're bound to try it. The guy was basically profiting off people's suffering and death. I think even Walter White would look down his nose at them. Ultimately, these giant frog creatures with claws escape one of the habitats and wreak havoc on the ship. And during the investigation, someone slips the captain of the space liner some of the drug, so he's out of action. So it's up to the cops to take charge of the situation after the Doctor and Romana are proved to be innocent. And once the smugglers are apprehended and the ships are separated to great risk, the Doctor has to lead all the creatures back into their little world and seal it up so that the assistants of the scientist can put all the creatures in the essentially space zoo back where they came from so they can live out their lives. And hopefully no one will discover the secret that the frog creatures are actually carrying the drug in their bodies. When they die, they dissolve into the drug. Oh, I forgot to mention, opening the first adventure, Romana actually regenerates off-screen. She does go through a couple of false starts. A little gray dude, an older Matahari-looking lady, a tall, statuesque woman, ultimately settling on the princess from the previous season's last adventure. And she even, for the first adventure with the Daleks, dresses a little bit like the Doctor, like with a coat and scarf, only more ladylike colors. Anyway, back to the adventures. Next, the Doctor locks horns with Naimon. Basically, this is a space version of Theseus and the Minotaur. A group of warlike humanoid aliens are giving sacrifices to this Minotaur-like creature called Naimon in order for it to provide them with new technology to reinvigorate their aging space fleet so they can once again become galactic conquerors. Think Rome at the end of its life. They want to bring back the good old days. And since the people of a neighboring planet who are peaceful remember the, for them, bad old days, they're too afraid to try to resist. Except one guy who apparently is going to destroy Naimon and save everybody, only he's kind of clueless. He's not even a prince, like he said. He's a runaway. He became an icon without trying, basically. Meanwhile, the Doctor and Romana figure out that the crystals, which are part of this sacrifice, are powering a device that's generating a wormhole that the sacrificial ship and the Doctor's Tardis got stuck in briefly. And it's being used to bring the rest of the Naimon's race from a dying planet that they had already used up. Basically, they're like nomads, only when they leave a planet, it's laying waste, usually blown up. But ultimately, the Doctor manages to outwit the warlike aliens, defeat their leader, and with Romana's help and her new handy-dandy sonic screwdriver, managed to defeat the Naimon and save, for lack of a better word, the warlike aliens, which will hopefully be less warlike now, and the peaceful aliens who will generate tons of legends about this story. And who knows, maybe this adventure took place in the dim and distant past, and the original story of Theseus and the Minotaur was inspired by this space legend. Although the Doctor did mention at one point him giving Theseus and his would-be girlfriend the ball of string to go through the maze rather than let them use his scarf. And now we come to the lost classic, Shada. The Doctor and Romana end up back on Earth in, I believe, Cambridge, and they're visiting an old friend of the Doctor's, a professor, who is soon to be revealed as a Time Lord who has been retired. And yet no one knows that he's effectively immortal, even though he hasn't left the school. Turns out the older schools on Earth are rather discreet when it comes to immortals. Unfortunately, the professor took a book from the Panopticon library on Gallifrey that he really shouldn't have, because it's actually the key to a prison planet called Shada, where a brilliant but dangerous criminal who can project his mind into other people is located. And add to that, a crazy alien played by the same guy who played the last Jaggeroth and General Veers from Star Wars Episode 5. Shows up with his sphere that can suck the mental capacity out of people and their memories, leaving them as little more than husks, which he already did to a think tank in order to get this far. He stole a ship, programmed it for evil. Actually, he built the ship, which he already programmed for evil, and cloaked it so it wouldn't be conspicuous on Earth. And he and his sphere of fear go after the Doctor. No, not the Doctor. Well, eventually they do, but originally they were going after the Professor. And ultimately they get him. They drain his mind, leaving him dead. But inexplicably, he disappears for some reason. And he kidnaps Romana and steals the Tardis. Because as it turns out, you need to read the book back to front inside a Tardis in order to get to Shada. No idea why he takes Romana, though, although I wouldn't care to speculate. On top of that, two former students of the Professor, Claire and Chris, are sort of pulled into the adventure when Chris takes the book that the Professor borrowed, and tries to figure out why it's acting all weird, why time seems to run backwards against its surface, and that it blew up his X-ray machine. He and Claire become brief companions of the Doctor and the Professor when, in order to help fix the Professor's TARDIS, which is actually his study/apartment, the Professor projects part of his knowledge into Claire's brain so she can help him. And as it turns out, he is the criminal who escaped Shada, took the book from the Panopticon library in order to keep people from remembering him, and settled into a sort of quiet retirement in order to sort of put his criminal past behind him, which is cool. He's sort of reformed. Unfortunately, the alien played by General Veers has dark designs on the Professor, who managed to somehow survive the Sphere of Fear, and it's revealed when Claire activates his TARDIS. Turns out General Veers, as I'm going to call him, wants to use the sphere and the Professor's mind in order to turn everyone into a universal entity. Kind of like what was supposed to happen at the end of The Expanse. Check out SF Debris' reviews of that story if you want to know more. He can take people's minds, but he can't put people's minds in anywhere. That's why he wanted the Professor's brain. But he didn't count on the Doctor, because the sphere attacked him as well, which allowed him to mentally project a copy of his brain into the sphere, which ultimately was the trump card in a battle which which involved the Doctor using the zombified inmates of Shada to distract the alien and K9 using his laser to supercharge the crystal yetis that the alien uses as backup, which causes them to explode. Ultimately, the alien is defeated and is teleported to his ship, which has been reprogrammed by the Doctor to not only keep him imprisoned, but also gush about how awesome the Doctor is, which is torture for the guy. Kind of feel sorry for him, actually. Basically, it's like someone who is not a Doctor Who fan having to endure a Doctor Who fan talking about Doctor Who at length, whether he wants to be heard or not. Ultimately, the Professor, Chris, and Claire are taken home, where they have to explain why one of the Cambridge staff revealed a void where the Professor's room used to be to a cop. And the Doctor, Romana, and K9, who has a slight personality upgrade after dealing with a case of laryngitis, despite being a robot, go off in the Tardis once more. And the Doctor muses that it's weird that such a criminal is now such a nice old man. And he wonders whether people will think the same things about him. Unfortunately, the TARDIS isn't working perfectly yet, and it causes the Doctor to look older than he really is for a few minutes. Yes, it's a cameo of Tom Baker at his age at the time, because the story was partially animated and voiced by the original cast. After it was shelved due to various strikes around Britain at the time, that's why it's considered a lost episode. And with that, yet another season of The Doctor has come to an end. When next we meet, we finally get to meet the bane of all Doctor Who fans, Adric. And of course, we meet more companions. And we may just meet some old enemies, not to mention new friends. And we have to endure the entropy of E-space. Until then, this is Mr. J signing out and reminding you, the Doctor is always right, especially when he's wrong.